Hello and welcome to Only Raw podcast. Today we have Jill Raycroft with us. How are you, Guneet?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Welcome, Jill.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome, and especially taking your time from important meetings and everything and giving us an opportunity to sit with you and talk about our community and get some motivation.
Yeah, we are very excited for this.
Well, I'm really excited to be here. Thank you
We
so
want to
much.
know lots of stuff that we had questions. Like, hopefully it will be worth it.
Right.
Absolutely. Hopefully I have all the answers.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about your position in Chamber of Commerce and what is Chamber of Commerce and what is the mission of Chamber of Commerce?
So the Belleville Chamber of Commerce. That's a really good question.
Yeah.
It's I have been in the role now for 8 years. And it'll be 8 years this week. So thank you for celebrating my anniversary with me. And I had spent a number of years at Loyalist College. I also worked at St. Lawrence College. I worked at the Safety Village. I ran for mayor, did a few different things trying to get to the point of securing a position with the Belleville Chamber. It wasn't necessarily what my high school teacher told me I should do when I grew up. It took me a long time to get there, but it has been an amazing 8 years. When I started, we weren't really sure what the chamber did either. And even defining what that value statement was probably the first 2 years of my job, figuring it out, where we fit in the community, and being able to articulate that really well.
Right.
So now we have our little tagline and always encourage people to say, what's your elevator pitch about what you do? And the chamber is here to help your business prosper. And we do that by connecting, representing, and sharing. So connect, represent, and share is our tagline.
Right.
We connect you to members of the community. We represent you at all levels of government. And we share a network of influence.
Right.
And how old is Belleville Chamber of Commerce?
160,
Wow.
160. So 1864, it was established under the Board of Trade Act and represented businesses across Hastings County at the time. In 1921, we migrated to an updated version of the Act, which was Part 2.
Right.
And that's when we switched the name from the Board of Trade to the Belleville Chamber of Commerce.
Right.
Okay.
So that's still been a long time.
Yeah.
I don't think I can break it, but it was still important to look at how we identified what we were supposed to do for our members.
Right.
Because we are a membership organization.
Yeah.
People aren't forced to belong. So like any organization where you pay dues to belong, you need to identify what that value is every single year.
Right. So how does Chamber advocate for the business people, those who are the members?
We have a few different ways of doing that. We have connections with the Ontario Chamber and the Canadian Chamber. So those are our channels to reach both Queen's Park and Parliament Hill in Ottawa. And each year we go through a process through the networks, either provincially or federally or nationally, where we'll put together a series of what we call policy resolutions. And this will identify issues and recommendations that we want the chamber at the provincial and the federal level to put on their book or compendium to deal with at that level of government. Friday happens to be our deadline for the Ontario Chamber.
Right.
And I'm working on 3 right now. Actually, one of them around post-secondary, community college funding and the lack thereof. The other issue we want to talk about is the difficulty for businesses to access funding or grant opportunities through the Ontario government.
Right.
The federal government has a little more streamlined process, so the recommendation will be to mirror that or make it a little easier. And then we also have a local member who has been a strong advocate for roundabouts. So we're going to put that forward. We'll see if there's any uptake on that as a business issue, but I think there's some economic connection as well with even traffic flow, reduced emissions.
Right.
And so those are the 3 we're looking at right now. We do have an ongoing issue with procurement policy and how public institutions in particular choose who supplies the goods that they need to create through vendor relationships.
Right.
And the federal government, actually Parks Canada, just issued a note to their employees that they could buy off Amazon. So that's a bit of a maybe not. That doesn't really
right.
support local business in any way. Yeah.
So you are like thinking about like creating a platform or just reaching out to government?
So the platform is the policy resolution. So we provide the issue. So the issue in one case might be the funding of post-secondary community colleges across Ontario, especially rural Ontario, has been lacking for many, many years. And there was a tuition freeze 10 years ago. So community colleges haven't been able to even raise the amount of money they can generate through student tuition. And it's caused this transition over to international student tuition because it generates more revenue, and to fill in the gap between where federal or provincial funding comes in to support that. And then the outcome now with the cap on international students presents a real challenge too.
So like, as you're talking about the cap on international student, so what we see, even we studied at Loyalist, right? So we are the alumni. You've been in Loyalist College, you still work with them. How does the cap affect Loyalist College, especially in the Belleville area? Like, what is your take on that?
Well, I know that the president and CEO, Mark Kirkpatrick, has been very clear that the community will suffer primarily with the reduction in workforce. Like that's going to be the immediate impact in the number of people who are available to work part-time or support roles in a variety of different businesses and sectors. So that's the first piece. But then the long-term impact is going to be the reduction in programming. The Loyalist College has typically supported a student body of about 300 to 3,500 students, and the domestic student enrollment continued to drop, more particularly through the 2000s. And the outreach to international communities for students started when I was there in the mid 2000s. Yeah. So this isn't a new thing. I remember the groups going to China, like that was the first. And Loyalist, like Ontario wasn't alone, Canada wasn't alone, England was looking at
Australia.
And exactly. England and Australia were definitely on that game, that same page, primarily because we were like the base of those countries were not producing enough people. We weren't having enough babies. So we needed something to increase our population as people were aging out of the workforce. So what was going to happen to fill those positions? So it's been an ongoing campaign to attract people from China and India into Canada, England, Australia. The colonized countries tend to be, I think, more, that used to be top of mind for them for sure. And bringing people to our community through education is a great way. It's an opportunity to acclimatize in a relatively safe environment. You're learning about a new skill at the same time as you're becoming accustomed to a community. I mean, I went to Toronto for university because I figured that's where I was going to have to work. So the idea was if I at least understood Toronto as a student, I wasn't trying to learn how to live, trying to get a job, trying to do all of the things at the same time. So school was a nice place to start.
Right. So what we see in news and especially the agenda going on, that what Mark Miller is doing towards the cap on international students and especially on the immigrants. So what do you think, like, is it benefit for Canada right now to cap on international students? And especially a lot of colleges are putting, they're doing the layoffs of the teachers. The permanent teachers are going part-time. Then I think Loyalist already had, I was just reading an article, it has like cut off, I think 34 programs or something. And then St. Lawrence did that also. What do you think about Mark Miller taking the cap right now?
If the cap were meant to fix a problem of fraud, if it were meant to eliminate programs that were falsely bringing people into the country under the guise of being a student and then moving them right into a system that they weren't able to sustain their livelihood here. If that was the purpose, that's one thing. the outcry around housing shortages is a thinly veiled way of trying to support that action. And I would say our housing crisis was already here. Like that wasn't the issue. So it comes out as a response to some loud voices that say, oh, it's the international students that are impacting our housing crisis. But that's, again, politically, I probably should. Well, no, politically, I will say, absolutely. I don't think that's the truth. I don't think that that's what people wanted to hear. And that's why people thought that the cap would be important.
Right.
But it's not. And then the other piece that it doesn't discuss is why international students were so important to communities and to colleges and to universities, partly because it attracted students to both central areas like Toronto, but also to rural communities like Belleville. And we would have very little here to say, come to Belleville. Like, get off the plane and come to Belleville. Like, I don't know, it's 3 hours away. Why would you? Like, it's not even on the radar. And when you think of coming from a different country, are you from Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver? Those are the places that kind of stick out on your mind. So it really did give small rural areas an opportunity to engage with the immigrant programming. And so it's a challenge. So I don't agree with it. I think it was done for the wrong reasons. And it doesn't support the needs of population growth we have to sustain.
What I think is, I think people were mad because like they were not filtering, like let's say in the past years, like they are just bringing students from India, because people are mad, like why only certain community or certain like region, like there's so many other countries.
Well, I think that Loyalist College has a really diverse international student population. So there might have been a visual presence that looked like it was India primarily. But I know that Nigeria was a clear present.
Philippines, Nigeria. Even I've studied like with a lot of people from different nations. But the highlight was on the whole propaganda and all that on the international student cap was targeted to the Indian community, right?
Which is unfortunate.
Yes, I feel that. And on behalf of Chamber of Commerce, and you are being a representative, you've been in Loyalist College, how do you think that like because of the international students, the domestic students got declined, or what was the reason that domestic students were not moving to the colleges?
Good question. I think there's always there's a piece of moving into post-secondary that is supported by the guidance you receive at home, the guidance you receive through your teachers or your guidance department at high school. And frankly, my guidance counselor would never have told me to be at the Chamber of Commerce. They thought I should be a teacher, and that was the last thing I ever wanted to do. Somehow I ended up in education anyway. But it was always at this isn't really my best fit. So, but if I wanted to be a real estate agent and I went to my guidance counselor in high school and said, I want to be a real estate agent, they would say, well, you should probably go to university first. So it was always like university first. So there's been a pressure, and then leave home. And of course, if you're in a rural area like Belleville or Prince Edward County or Quinte West, your options are Queens or Toronto or Ottawa U. And you might go the other side of Toronto, but most people were afraid of that. You might see a few hitting Waterloo, Kitchener, that area. So there was that first pressure to kind of, or the guidance, and your parents are saying, oh, you know what? I never got to go to school, so you should go. So this is an opportunity we can provide you. I mean, much like people coming here, they see an opportunity, and it's always about making sure your children have better access to their potential or living out their potential. So it all comes from a very good place, but it's often, it excludes the discussion about why you should go to a local college, where in the past there was sometimes that was the only access someone had to post-secondary. So for somebody who wanted to go into a healthcare program, Loyalist was an amazing institution for that. They changed the nursing program slightly over the years, but I can remember when all you needed was a diploma to be a registered nurse.
Yeah.
And Loyalist College had the highest rate of successful graduates or entrance into registered colleges. They're registered into the College of Nurses. So they had a really impactful presence in that way. And sometimes it's just too close to home.
Right, that's true.
So it, like I say, you've got a kind of a couple of competing priorities where you're at. You've got parents suggesting that they go away, and then you've got kids who want to get away. Like I couldn't wait to leave Picton and go to Toronto.
Right.
Absolutely. I'm never, ever coming back.
Right.
And then, of course, my parents told me that I was going to go to university. I didn't have a choice. So I got a really dumb degree, but it was all I had to do was check off the box.
Right.
And so I think that was part of the decline in domestic student enrollment. I don't think there was anybody who was denied a spot.
Right. But it's just
it was filling the gap. So if you only have if you have the capacity to teach 3,500 students and only 1,500 are enrolling, well, you want to fill that space, right? And so the international student market became very attractive.
Right.
And secondary to that was you could charge more.
Yeah. Because
3 times more.
three times more.
Yes,
than that.
exactly.
So do you get information that the students have been declined in Loyalist College, the international quota has been reduced, and like there are like stoppage on the construction, there are like declining in the courses and programs? Do you get that information?
Not yet. I think it's still early days. There's always the possibility that there will be some funding redirected.
Right.
There's a skills development fund that, the premier announced $100 million to skills development.
Yeah.
The problem is that a lot of that money goes to support private industry training and specifically towards skilled trades, which everybody says, we need more skilled trades. 100% don't disagree. But the apprenticeship programs that are required to prepare those students or people for work in those fields aren't managed through the college system. They're managed through a ministry and the College of Trades.
Right.
And all of a sudden, the people offering that training are not located at colleges. So there's a lot of money being invested in skilled trades, but it's not filtering into the college programs. So that's another issue. So we're saying there is an opportunity here for the Ontario government to take the money that they've been investing and like $1 billion that they've invested in skilled trades training and redirecting that to community college programming, in particular rural colleges.
Right. Because a lot of students, those who come and take the skilled trade programs, but they're not getting the apprenticeships or any kind of co-ops because of various reasons, right? But if government is investing a lot of money into it and putting through, then maybe they could make some kind of channels through the ministry with the different businesses. So not even international, but the domestic students can also be benefited from that.
Yes.
Right.
There are a lot of things that could be done differently.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
if that were an intake process for international students, but I don't think it is.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, moving to our other topic, local businesses.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what are the main challenges that the local businesses face when they start?
So there are a few different things I guess we could talk about. Number one, the business community in Belleville is extremely diverse. So people talk about, retail must be business or healthcare must be business, but they don't think of healthcare as business, but it is. They might consider what you see as a forward-facing store is predominantly what gets funded or supported by a Chamber of Commerce. But interestingly enough, we've got 500 members. 10% of those are nonprofit and social service agencies. 10% of those are retailers. 10% of that is manufacturing. 10% of that are professional services, so legal and accounting. 10% of that is advertising and publishing and marketing and the other services that go along to provide that. Another 10% might be arts and culture. So we have a very diverse community here that people don't necessarily consider as business.
Right.
But you probably both know that there isn't a single job that you do, doesn't matter where or how, that doesn't somehow involve sales or customer service.
That's true.
So every organization in some capacity operates as a business, and that's what we work to support. And that's where so much of our advocacy when we develop a policy resolution is meant to support all of that.
Right.
So when we say we want to support an issue around post-secondary education, especially as it affects rural community colleges, that means that students going into the college programming system are going to be the workforce at the other end that
true.
all of those businesses could manage. So if you want to be a real estate agent, guess what? You're still going to a program at Humber College. It's an online piece.
Right.
But if you wanted to start with something, a business administration diploma is a great way to get an idea of the skills you'll need as a real estate agent
Right.
or a realtor. So the realtor program gives you the specifics on how to do that job, but you still need a basic skill set and understanding of how to manage your marketing, how to understand your product, and how to even deal with your bookkeeping. Those are all parts of it. So, I mean, that would be one of the things I would say that some of the college programs really give that introductory skill level and understand kind of and it's creating transferable skills.
That's good. Right. So, what are the trends you are looking you are seeing in the local community economy wise?
Well, that's a good question. We do business openings too, so grand openings, and we did 50, 60 last year. So there are a lot of people who are finding opportunity and being either a solopreneur or an entrepreneur.
Right.
And they've identified whether it's a car wash or a storytelling business or a cleaning business or legal services or accounting, bookkeeping. There are people who are looking for those opportunities to serve a community, and there's a lot of places where they can find clients. They're all busy. So so sometimes those single source service providers are a key piece to the business community as well.
Right.
And there's a lot of opportunity here, and people are finding a way to fit that need.
Right. And even in the last few years, we have seen like a lot of new restaurants coming in, like different businesses, stores are opening. So people are seeing that potential. And there is like a lot of moving from GTA to Belleville.
Yes,
so
number 3, right?
Yeah, so there's like a lot of people, those who are moving from all the big cities to Belleville, and it's growing.
Right.
So that's another good part, that at least it's getting more diverse, more uplifting in the community, right?
Yes, and I think we've seen that over the last 5-6 years. I think in
Yeah.
2016, we were finally identified as a CMA, which is a central or a census metropolitan area. So it meant within a surrounding area, within this kilometer space,
Right.
over 150,000 people. So that's a lot of people to feed, clothe, support through a variety of different.
So do you have
businesses.
any idea like what will be the population right now? Like, are we like 100,000 nearby?
Well, we're 50, like in Belleville alone, we're sitting at 56,000, 57,000.
But that's like the same thing
When we moved in here.
moved to Belleville. So
a few years ago, but in 5 years ago, it was 46,000 or 49,000.
Oh.
So it's grown a lot in the last
Right,
5 years.
right,
And
right.
that's a significant increase. So that's 10%.
yeah.
And that's unusual. Where
Right.
before, I don't think that needle moved for probably 40 years.
Yeah. Right.
And the real estate market was pretty stagnant for a
Yeah.
very long time. There was an influx of, well, I want to say Torontonians, or people retiring from the GTA that found kind of a refuge in the county and said, oh my God, I can create a hobby second business, or this can be my retirement hobby-ish
Right,
business. And it'll be interesting to see how those age out now, because there are some of them that are really dependent on the talent of the person that started that business.
Right.
And if they leave, what fills that space?
That's
So
true.
the potters and the artists and
Yeah.
the wine region coming in, but there are wineries for sale now. So that was fun for 10 years, but maybe I don't want to do that anymore. And
That's true.
what happens to Prince Edward County as a wine region if all the people that bought those wineries decide
Yeah.
that they don't want to do that? So there's a transition happening as well, I
Right.
think, at this point.
And
And what do you think it's the best opportunity here right now? If anyone is let's say starting anything new, what is missing piece here?
That's a really good question. Because what I find most interesting about every new business that starts is like, I wonder where they're going to find clients, or I wonder where they're going to find customers, and they thrive. So it's being able to meet a niche demand. I think there's part of that too. And what would be the next big thing? Sometimes it's a hit or miss, and sometimes something that you don't expect. I think if you're really good at doing something and you understand the need for it in a community, then you create some energy around that being a need, and then everybody else wants it. So we didn't need a cell phone, but now everybody does. And so those are small pieces of.
Right.
But even the onset of the shared economy and Uber, well, we have U-Ride finally.
Yeah.
But it took a long time for that to come here. But it's happening now.
Right.
The skip the dishes was forever, but COVID gave that an opportunity in our community where before that I couldn't get anybody to deliver to my house before. And I'm 5 minutes north of the 401. It's probably easier to get to my house from Bell Boulevard than it is to get out here in the East End.
Right. So how does Chamber supports the new businesses and startups?
So here's the interesting piece. Usually by the time someone comes to us, they've already been established in business.
Okay.
They've already gone through the pains of figuring it out because we are the added value of being a part of a community.
Right.
And while we do our best to help connect, and that's where our networking events can be an incredibly important tool to someone just starting, making connections, giving people opportunities to meet each other. But sometimes that's overwhelming for a new business who's just trying to figure out how they're supposed to do this bookkeeping thing. And they're overwhelmed in the business and they're not working on the business.
Right.
So when they come to us, they're starting to work on the business and build it. And that's where we find we're a really good fit. And they're also experiencing some of the sense of isolation. They've built their business and now they're successful, but now they're feeling lonely as a business owner because the people who weren't successful around them, 3 years ago are going, oh yeah, you got so really lucky with your business. And they don't pay any attention to how hard someone's had to work for that.
That's true.
And there's that whole perception that if you do well in business, you somehow got lucky.
Right.
And if I pay you for your service, then you've somehow benefited because I paid you for something.
Right.
Like joke about, well, if I have a personal trainer and I see them driving a new truck, then I somehow take responsibility and maybe am envious because they have a new truck because they're charging me this amount of money.
Right.
Like, oh my gosh, maybe I'm not going to pay you that anymore because look what you get.
That's true.
I'm like, yeah, I paid for the hinge on your door. You're welcome. So it's kind of understanding that being a business owner is an extremely difficult path.
Yeah.
And when we did a strategic planning session in September and we sat down with members and had them talk to members of our board and just explain why did you join the chamber and why did you stay? And the surprising answer was it took the isolation out of being a small business owner. So a lot of our members are between 1 to 5 employees. So about half of our members are that size. So they really are doing it on their own and they're doing everything.
Right.
And this provides a safe community for them to share their pain and get ideas from each other. And even if they're in completely different lines of work or business environments, the challenges are often the same. Like, how do I connect with customers? Oh, I have to hire an employee.
Yeah.
Where do I find that person? What do I need to do?
So,
now all of a sudden I have to think about benefits and I have to think about payroll, and those are things I hadn't thought about before. So who in my hive now?
So
can
Chamber is like a one-stop shop for everything.
So
we're a connector.
Yeah. So do you have any story you want to share about a thriving business that came to you and, it flourished somehow?
I think what we love the most is when we can put people together. So we have so let's take, there's one group that wants to do this session and they've engaged the services of an amazing leadership coach who happens to volunteer with their program. Okay. So it's a nonprofit organization. And so as part of the free session, they're asking us to promote that. And that's our game. We can do that 100%. But in turn, they also want to create a fundraising lunch. So we have another partner, Quinny Gardens, who will support us with a free lunch. And we bring in different learning topics. So we've done one on employment with employees with disabilities, how to work through the process of understanding needs and accommodations, visible and invisible. We also had a conversation about circles of trust to start the conversation around diversity and inclusion. And we go to Queenie Gardens and they give us a free lunch and we have a nice little group that talk about that.
That's good.
But now Karis, who's just the sweetest person in the world, says, well, if you have another kind of an event, like we can support other organizations. It doesn't need to be you. So now we've hooked them up with the Learning Foundation. They're going to provide a lunch, and the Learning Foundation can charge for the lunch, but they aren't going to be charged to supply it. Like it's just so it's really cool where these so there's one organization that really wants to be involved with the community and support initiatives, but they wouldn't necessarily know how to connect with those.
Right.
We had MP Ryan Williams in the cabin for what we called the cabin chats. First time we'd really done something like this, and we offered members the opportunity to come in for 15 minutes. But I also grouped people with like interests or needs together. So we had 3 nonprofit organizations that sat in the room with the MP, but the relationships they developed in the 15, 20 minutes together might see a huge growth in the community garden program. So between Gleaners and Habitat for Humanity and the Alzheimer's Society being at the table, the Alzheimer's Society has people who would benefit from the handiwork of working in a garden. Habitat might have some land that they could expand the gardening program.
Right.
And then Gleaners can make use of both of those resources to grow the program and help feed. Or, the Community Development Council, because they do so CDC does the gardens. So just putting those 3 people in a room, maybe not intentionally, but knowing that having them together at the same time would help.
Yep.
You know that the MP's answer isn't going to be different for any one of those.
Yeah.
He's going to give the same answer. But if they hear about each other's problems, maybe they can even offer solutions to each other. So those are really cool stories, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jill, you have probably seen so many businesses open and close. And what is the main reason that mistake everyone is making that they are shutting down their businesses? Like, what's the main thing?
And I'm going to take it out of the business sphere just for a little bit, only because I think this is common to anybody who gets excited about an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw it a lot when I dealt with applied research at St. Lawrence College. So we had a researcher who would come with a really great idea. Okay, I'm going to ask people this particular question and I'm going to solve this problem with their answers. And I know everybody's going to want to answer this survey. And I know they're going to want to do this because I'm going to solve the biggest problem in the world.
Obsession.
And passion.
Yeah.
And it tends to narrow your focus and inability to look outside of what the competition is or what could be a barrier. So when you don't take time to look at the barriers, you don't anticipate the challenges. And so as someone who would coach someone through that research project and say, okay, this is where you're probably going to run into a bit of a stumbling block because people aren't going to want to answer that question. Or you're saying you're going to give them a prize, but provide them anonymity. Well, those two don't work because you can't give something to somebody if you don't know who they are. Mm-hmm. So let's work through some of those pieces. And I would say that's a general stumbling block for any new business owner is they think they've got the best thing. They overinvest in either operating costs or inventory or assets or something that they think is going to be worth a lot of money to somebody, but then they don't know how to sell it and they're not connected to the target audience properly.
Right.
And so when we say, you know what, if you shift it just a little bit, you might get there. No, but this is what I do.
Yeah.
Well, is it working for you? Those are the hard questions. And not people would like us to sell stuff for them. And that's where we see people getting disappointed in our service as an organization to connect people.
Right.
So if they don't want us to represent them at levels of government, so advocacy isn't very sexy. They'd really much rather have their stuff in our cabin and won't you sell my stuff or won't you sell my tickets or won't you do this?
Yeah.
Well, if we sold that for you, then we'd have to do it for everyone. And honestly, I can't tell you who your target audience is. You need to spend a little bit more time thinking about that. Happy to work through what that looks like. even when I was teaching new venture development at St. Lawrence, we talk a little bit about, I did a lot of marketing. I taught a lot of marketing students, probably 700 in the space of 18 months with an online course through the college system.
Right.
And the biggest barrier is people don't really understand who the target audience is for their product. So they think that all they have to do is promote it. But if you don't know who you're promoting to, because they're the people who need it. Mm-hmm. So the one student who said to me, yeah, I'm going to have a motorcycle repair shop. I said, so who do you think your target audience is? Men. Okay, so let's just for fun say, with the exception of me, all your teachers are male. How many of your teachers in the program you're in right now have motorcycles?
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Oh, okay. So first of all, your target audience is only going to be motorcycle owners. And they're only going to be motorcycle owners that can actually travel to your shop. So now all of a sudden, it's not all men. Right. That's 50% of the population. Yeah. So let's start distilling it down and look at what your capacity for service is, like what's the potential growth. And then how do you identify how much of that market you could possibly capture and what could you serve? Because the other side of it is people get too busy to do the work.
Right.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. So I had one girl saying, what if she makes bread? And she said, what would you think my best bet is to get into? Should I go to the farmer's market and I sell my bread there every week? And I said, well, what's your capacity for production? Like if you're working out of your kitchen, how many loaves of bread can you make in a week? Mm-hmm. Because you don't want to go to a deli and say, I'm going to provide you all your bread and make that relationship. Yeah. And then all of a sudden people come in to get the sandwich. Well, sorry, we're out of bread. Because our supplier can't do that. So it's really understanding your capacity for growth and whether or not the person you're trying to sell that product to needs more or less than.
Right. Are there specific industries, those who struggle more than the others?
For different reasons. Yeah. I think there are some that whenever it's a disposable income kind of thing, so if I don't need to buy it, that's a really specific target market that you're trying to capture. So if you're trying to sell purple feathers, and that's the only thing you have, it can be hard to find the people who want purple feathers. And that takes a very special technique. So you might have to decide, okay, do I also have to sell blue feathers and purple feathers? And now at least I can sell to the people who also want blue feathers. But then the other side of that is, as you grow, then do you have the labor force that you need? And that's been an ongoing challenge for me. I would say that has been a biggest challenge over the last 5-6 years. I mean, the labor shortage was coming in long before COVID happened. And we were hearing that entry-level positions were really hard to fill.
Right.
And that's where, so if a manufacturer doesn't have enough people to make the product, then of course their production capacity is limited and now they can't sell to the person that they had committed to selling to.
Right.
And that's a problem that existed in 1948, believe it or not. And it was the housing crisis and labor shortage, and the chamber was actually involved in advocating for making housing a public commodity and that the city should actually build houses and engage the home building industry. They could do it for this amount of money, but because inventory was so limited, very much like we are now, that the only way to provide what was considered affordable housing was to increase inventory quickly. So they came up with a bit of a plan. And the housing development, if you go by the hospital and you see all those houses that look exactly the same, that was the area that was identified. I don't know if they ever were what they call public housing or moved into that commodity type environment, but the fact that they all look the same, I'm sure was a big part of that strategy to create, and more time that happened in.
And those were built like 30, 40 years ago?
1948, 1948. Like late 40s, early 50s. So that whole wartime house thing, and you'll see communities across Ontario with little pockets of housing developments that look just like that.
Yeah, exactly same.
But because we talked to lots of builders too, and they said it's so hard to get a permit now. The application fees is a lot now.
So there's application fees, there's development charges, there's a part of all of that as well. And the reality is that gets passed on to the buyer.
And that's why the prices goes up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the end consumer that suffers always. And even as we talk about the tariffs and the potential impact of that, I mean, businesses will continue to pay. They'll have to. It's just whether the end consumer says, wait a minute, I can't have the blue feather now because it's going to cost me that much money to have it.
So let's talk a little bit more on tariffs.
Sure.
So do you want to elaborate like how it's going to affect us and especially the local community, middle class people, right? And what
If it does not work out after 30 days that we got.
Well, I think the initial response has been an emphasis on buying either made in Canada or a product of Canada. So that is one way to offset. And if Canada engages in trade partnerships with countries outside of the US, so for example, maybe we won't be drinking Tropicana orange juice, but maybe we'll get our orange juice from somewhere else. And so is there a substitute product or a substitute supplier that will be able to support that? It's hard to say whether the prices will be impacted directly, especially with a new trading relationship. There always is some time and you're testing people out and testing each other out, making sure that the product is the quality your customers expect. Because the last thing you want to do is end up with, I thought I was getting this and all of a sudden it wasn't what I expected. So will people transition to a new product as well?
Right.
So, or will I pay $10 for my Florida orange juice instead of the $6 I was used to paying to get Hawaiian or Vietnam orange juice?
But does have you seen any of those moves from the US government before? Like any of that?
I think it tends to impact at a much higher level. So industry, you see the issues with the auto industry and a lot of parts that are assembled in Canada then go back to auto manufacturing plants. And it's why you see some auto manufacturing, certain vehicles made in Canada and certain vehicles made in the States. But all the headlamps are made at Magna and Hannon.
Yeah.
Right.
So all of a sudden, what's that look like when they have to go back and forth? There's a really interesting trade tracker that the Ontario, I think the Canadian Chamber put out. Yes. So if you go to Canadian Chamber, chamber.ca, basically, there's a link to a trade tracker, and you can kind of delve into where trade relationships rely on things crossing the border for each other and what the impact might be.
Oh,
because I was watching the news. Doug Ford says he's gonna cut off the electricity between New York and.
Well, they buy it, right? And so, I mean, if you don't want to pay the tariff, then I guess we could cut it off.
Yeah.
And those are threats that are meant to just make sure people are listening. It's much the same way that the President of the United States has created this flurry of activity around issues that we didn't really think of as our problem, like a border control issue really wasn't what we thought we had to deal with.
That's true.
And so you've thrown that into the mix and you go, okay, well, how do we even fix a problem that might not exist? And if it's such a minuscule, if less than 1% of the fentanyl going, is going, like, how are you going to measure progress there? So it's going to be less than 0.5%.
Yeah.
So those are silly metrics to kind of put beside the impact of a 25% tariff.
Right. But again, like what news is saying that, that Trudeau did the negotiations and suddenly 1.3 billion allotted to the government on the border security and 10,000 troops going to be securing the borders, stopping the fentanyl and whatever the border crossing, right? Is it just a hoax that they're doing, or is it like they're going to implement it? What do you think about that?
Good question. I guess the question is, how sustainable is it, or are there deficiencies in that process that will be corrected by that kind of investment?
Right.
And that's possible. I think that the border security between Mexico and the U.S. is a very different situation than the border security issue for Canada and the U.S.
Yeah.
And we're kind of jumping to that similarity because they're talking about it the same way.
Yeah.
But more importantly is our investment in defense and the fact that we aren't looking at our northern borders. So we're not protecting our northern border from Russia or China.
Yeah.
And I think you'll see a significant, and we've lapsed on, and we have been for a very long time, lapsed on our commitment to defense spending and relied on our position as peacekeepers, and no one wants to hurt Canada. So
Right.
we're safe. And, I don't know if it's wise to say it in a podcast kind of thing that might live forever.
Yeah.
But, we might not want to be the 51st state, and we can say, oh, yeah, we're not going to join the US. But if Russia said, well, now you'll be Russian, would we say, please take us?
Yeah.
So there's we're not really considering the threat to the north or the east and what that might imply if all of a sudden China said, well, we're just going to take Vancouver.
That's true. That's true.
Because whenever there is any, let's say, drug seized at the border, like from truck drivers or anything, it's always from the US side. Like
Well, I think
driver is
that's the
coming
other-
from
yeah.
the US side.
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing. My husband was saying that to me the other day. He says, okay, if the stuff is coming up and we're catching it at our border, that means it's coming from the US. So what is really the problem here?
Yeah.
And he's
How many Canadians are trying to escape to the US?
Yeah, that's true. And the way he's talking to Canada and Mexico, even the border crossing and all the drug dealings and cartels are in Mexico.
Yeah.
So he should be doing on that part, right? Not to us.
He's bullying both
Yeah.
countries at the same level.
Right. And again, behind closed doors, it's hard to say if media and what you see online and what Americans believe to be the truth, because if you're in the Midwest of the US, you may see the Canadian border as just as open and weak as the border between the US and Canada. You're not connected to either side.
Yeah.
So you don't really know.
That's true.
Floridians don't see people from Canada crossing in. They don't know. They just hear what they're told.
That's true.
And someone from Texas might have a very different, or Arizona might have a very different story about the Mexican-US border than someone from Iowa.
That's true. That's true. All right. Let's do a quick thing on funding and support programs, what Chamber provides. So what are the fundings available for small businesses?
Good question. It's interesting that you asked that because I was in France visiting my brother, that my dad lives there, and beautiful big Chambre de Commerce in Pau, small town. It's about the size of Belleville, maybe a little bit bigger, but this huge building. But the chambers of commerce in Europe tend to be the bank for business.
Oh.
So a very different approach. We don't have money. We operate as a nonprofit. So we don't give money away. We don't have money to give away. We love sponsorship because that supports the work we do. And we actively fundraise in a very quiet way.
Yeah.
What we do try to do is identify where programs exist and what businesses can do to attract them. The Small Business Center in Trenval their purpose is to support the funding mechanism and attract potential lenders and businesses who are looking for investment. So we have an organization in the community that really is designed to support that work, and we work closely with them. And we do find that some of the businesses that they get off the ground will then ultimately, those are some of the business openings that we do. And then in time, they may become a chamber member. We don't tend to deal with a lot of startup. Like I say, by the time people come to us, now that doesn't mean that they aren't looking for opportunities. And definitely there were some unique programs that were made available through advocacy during COVID. So the SEBA loan, so the opportunity for businesses to get an interest-free loan for that period of time. And then if you didn't need it and paid it back, you got the $10,000. Those were things, the discount or the allowance for certain payroll fees to be discounted. Yeah. Those were other opportunities that we fought really hard for to make sure that all small businesses were able to take advantage of them. We had one business that had incorporated in February of 2020 because they had just grown to the point where they should. COVID hit and they were ineligible because they were incorporated but didn't have a year's worth of financials as a corporation. Right. On the flip side, because they were incorporated, they couldn't apply to the second phase that came out that if you weren't incorporated, you could apply for it because you weren't eligible for EI or all the other things. So now you could apply for it in a different way. So there were, the conversation at the time was, yes, the net has been cast widely, but the holes are really big. So you need to tighten up the holes in that safety net that you've created. So those would be some of the advocacy work we did. But then we also did COVID tests. We put out 70,000 COVID tests in the space of about 15 months. And so they were free. The government had them sitting in warehouses, and a couple of chambers in Western Ontario said, you know what, we think we could probably get those distributed to people who really need them. And the program was launched. And then the government actually supported the chamber network to distribute that as a distribution center. So like I say, we benefited a little bit by being able to offer that service and let people come in and get those tests. 15,000 in a week. It was unbelievable. The Christmas of 2020. I think it was. When everybody was panicking. I'm trying to think, it was the Christmas of 2020 or the Christmas of 2021 when the program started and when we got it launched, and how many went out. We didn't even know we'd got to double the order. Right. In fact, and they went out the door so fast, and we just kept pushing them out. So, and we tracked it all, and we had to be able to identify exactly how many tests went out the door and how many businesses were served. So over 700 businesses served, and that kind of worked. But I think that wasn't really your question, like where the funding comes from. So the government does offer programs, and one of our other policy resolutions is to help businesses have a one-stop shop for that kind of funding opportunity. So whether it's, there are very few grants or funding opportunities that will support operations. So it needs to be a new project or maybe a capital expense, but it's hard to find funding that will say, okay, you know what, we're going to pay you to just stay open.
That's true.
Yeah.
Right.
So those are, and then the federal government. But the federal government has a more streamlined process. So the advocacy work at this point is to make the provincial process as easy as the federal process.
Okay, Jill, tell us about your events that you guys do. Like how often you do, like what are the benefits?
Sure. So we typically are engaged with events for the chamber members, and we have a mingle almost every month, and that's a networking opportunity. So that runs from 5 till 7 p.m. and we move it around to one location, and it changes every month. So we have a host that is willing to support bringing a number of people in, and they are responsible for the food. If they need a partner, we'll try to hook them up with somebody who can help. Right. And then it sometimes is a joint venture. They can, and we just bring people into a space that others may not have thought to go into. So it offers exposure to the business or the organization and the work they do.
Is there any big projects, or is there any big companies, those who are coming and investing in Belleville? Or do you have any idea yet?
We just did the grand opening for McKeel. So McKeel Logistics is the new big building just off of Adams Street. Right. I don't know if you've driven along the 401, but it's massive. It really has that presence, right? So it's a pet food.
I always wonder what's gonna open there.
It's a pet food company.
Okay.
So McKeel Logistics is the transportation, the 3PL that manages the product that is in there, supported by Hagen Foods. Right. And Hagen does a lot of pet products. And so they're located in Montreal, and they also had a distribution center, I think, in Toronto area. But now all of their distribution is coming out of Belleville.
Oh, okay. So
and will manage. Yeah.
And how many jobs that opened?
So they have about they have a team of about 100, and it's a very efficient warehouse. And the receiving and distribution kind of goes out during the day, and then packing goes kind of is the evening group. Yeah. So that was an exciting one last week, and they actually came in yesterday, and Mr. Janak signed up McKeel as a member. So it's always exciting to see a new member like that join the chamber.
Right.
Another one. Is Costco coming?
That's a good question. Yeah, it's in 2014, when I ran for mayor, everybody was talking about Costco coming and whether or not that was going to happen. And I could have easily said at that time, not even on anyone's dream board or vision board at this point in time, certainly not on the Costco side. But when Belleville kind of hit that CMA status as a census metropolitan area in 2016, then the conversation changed slightly. Costco had also developed a store near Georgian Bay, and they wanted to identify if people coming to cottage areas would actually use the Costco closer to their cottage or closer to their home. And they found, I think that store proved that they could support some of the external customers coming in because they were familiar with shopping with Costco, even if the local even if the local economy wasn't so much invested in a Costco. And there are some considerations about whether or not Costco would be helpful to small business in this area. Not going to lie.
Yeah.
What kind of an impact would that have on grocery stores locally? There is certainly some consideration there. So in 2014, I would have said no way. 2016, all of a sudden, okay, maybe. And then when they started to develop the land on West Bell Boulevard, and it looked like they were coming, and then COVID hit, I would say it was that much closer. I think there were some, some of the boxes got checked to say, yes, Belleville should be a good location, but it got slowed with a lot of different things. So it's not on the list right now. I would say it will come in time if Costco outlives, the other things.
Right.
It's hard to
There
say.
there is a chance.
There's still a chance.
Yeah.
Yes. Never say never. I mean, the minute I say no, that's never going to happen. It's going to.
Yeah.
So never.
Right. All right. With this, we'll wrap up. And thank you so much, Jill, for coming and having a podcast with us. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yes. Well, I hope you found it informative, and
It was very
certainly,
good.
like I say, anybody who wants to learn more can always go to our website, bellevillechamber.ca. And I'd also recommend, if you're looking for events happening in the community, discoverbelleville.ca is a great place to look.
Right.
We host visitor services out of the Little Log Cabin,
Yeah.
and that's a service agreement we've had with the city for many, many years. I want to say almost 100, to be honest. But we've been in the Log Cabin for 40, and so now we've gone into the digital space.
That's all right, guys. See you in the next episode. And
Thanks
thank
for
you so
coming, Jill.
much. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.